I work with a lot of exonerees from death row and prison, but the ones that death row, where the stakes are so high, impact me so greatly. And one of these gentlemen recently that spent over 30 years on death row for a crime he did not commit, DNA completely exonerated him. And then all of a sudden, his alibi of not even being in the state at the time seemed to make a lot more sense. Someone asked him, how are you not bitter? How are you not just so angry that they did this to you? And without even thinking, he said, you know what? That's why the rear view mirror is this big and the windshield is this big. He said, they took 32 years. I'm not giving them another minute by living in the past. It's all forward. It's all in front of me right now. I don't have time to carry a grudge and be upset about what's happened in the past. Maybe I should, maybe it makes sense, but I don't have another minute to waste. I'm all looking forward at this point. And all of these guys, and they're all guys because there are so few women on death row, all of these guys have such a spirit about them. Those that are still on death row that know they're innocent. There's a man on death row in Oklahoma right now that I am so committed to getting exonerated. His name's Richard Glossop. He didn't commit the crime any more than I did. And he's had his last supper 3 times. And every time he has shared it with the guards. I asked him, what do you mean? He said, look, they're just doing their job. They're not doing anything wrong. And let me tell you, I don't want to eat alone. So he shares this meal with the guards, and 3 times they've gone down there and either had a last-minute reprieve. Once they were going to execute him, and they had the wrong drugs. So they said, hey, we screwed up. You got to go back. Then they suspended executions in Oklahoma for a number of years, so he sat there waiting again. Now he's on the list again, and we're working hard to get him off of it. But his attitude is, hey, I know I didn't do it. These guards, I think they know I didn't do it, but it's not their decision. And he doesn't have this revenge loop in his head. He's chosen to forgive everybody involved and just believes that the right thing's going to happen. He's going to walk out someday. It's his choice. He has set himself free, even though he's in a cage.
That's remarkable and again miraculous, right? I mean, that's the stuff of miracles, when you can be on death row and still set yourself free from the inside. And knowing this now, what we've just described, you know it so well, you've seen it in other people. We have to ask ourselves as humans, so why don't, if it's so wonderful an experience, why don't we do it more? Why do we withhold forgiveness from ourselves as victims? Why do we withhold this from ourselves as a society and disparage forgiveness as something that weak people do, or that only a certain select elite person like a I don't know, a Gandhi or a King or a Jesus would do? These aren't truth statements that anybody can do it. But why is it that we can't? And now we have a scientific explanation for that. It's this addiction. It's this craving. Your brain is so hijacked by the grievance, and it sets in motion these 2 areas of your brain, the dorsal striatum and the nucleus accumbens. And when these 2 areas of your brain activate, they're the same areas that activate for narcotics or chocolate, if that's your thing, or sex, whatever, different powerful cravings. When those things activate, you're driven, you're strongly motivated to seek revenge for pleasure. And what we know is that's the same way with a drug. You seek the drug for pleasure. Yes, you'll get a little bit of pleasure for a short period of time, and then it'll destroy you. It'll leave you in more pain than you were. The same process is at work here.
Then you need another fix. I don't want people to gloss over when we throw big words around, but nucleus accumbens, we're talking about the pleasure center. This is how your brain feels pleasure. That's how you experience pleasure. And it can get hijacked by things that are not healthy for you to feel pleasure about. You feel pleasure when your child says mama or dada for the first time, or when your team wins, or something happens that's healthy and constructive. But it can also get hijacked by drugs or revenge or things that aren't healthy for you. And that's what you're talking about here. I think part of it too is people think that they're being pansies if they don't stand up for themselves and fight back and get even. If you had gotten even that night when you had those morons pinned against a barn, I just have a problem with people being cruel to animals. But had you stood up for yourself and been macho that night, we very likely would not be talking right now.
Well, you might be talking to me
Yeah.
on death row.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where you might be interacting with me right now, and that would be a real tragedy. And that's exactly right. This desire for, we really are up against it in American society, where the glorification of revenge seeking at the social networking level on media, movies, superhero movies are designed to trigger your revenge craving. They give you a grievance at the beginning. Many movies do. You get a grievance and they activate in the audience the desire for retaliation. They string that out for about an hour and 20 minutes or so. And then you finally get your fix. Your fist is clenched. Finally, the villain got his. You're out the door and they want to bring you back again, and you know where the fix is and you know how to get it. So it happens in video games, it happens in movies. And there's been a lot of discussion about, do violent video games cause violence? It's not the violence in the video game that's risky. It's the stimulation of the revenge craving that's risky. The more often you play, the more often you take any drug, the more you're conditioned to it, the more you want it, and the more higher quality and higher quantity of that drug you want. And so the risk isn't just that it isn't the portrayal of violent imagery that will drive somebody to commit an act of violence. It is, though, this conditioning of an individual who finally gets a real grievance in their head to go, I know what made me feel good in those video games. It's a small step now between that and a real handgun or a rifle or something else. So we cling, and we want that craving fulfilled, and we don't want to give it up. If you talk to a heroin addict and say, hey, sir, how about why don't you just do the right thing here and stop taking heroin? They're not going to do it. They're addicted. That's the whole problem with it. So to expect somebody that has a powerful justice addiction or revenge addiction to just give that up, even though you could show that through forgiveness, they will truly experience freedom, is a tough ask. And that's why we're now developing these interventions to make forgiveness easier and help this, as I was saying, methadone for a justice addict, allow them to experience a safer form of this revenge in order to get them beyond it, to start thinking clearly again. And this applies, as you said, Dr. Phil, to any form of grievance. It's not just about violence. It's anything in your life, any family member, friend, employer, the person at the checkout counter, the person at the gas pump. It just applies everywhere.